Hi, I'm Jesse Hirsh, and welcome to another episode of Metaviews, recorded live at the Academy of the Impossible, where the goats are actually outside right now, enjoying some sun. I forgot to update the title. I was going to put chaos in the title, and maybe that will be the title, but our Radical American Whackadoo is back. We are winding down the end of season 2, and I keep saying that largely because I'm in the design phase of season 3. So I'm starting to think about the iteration of the podcast. And so I'm coming today with a couple of agenda items. Even though, as our loyal viewers and listeners know, that the tail end here of season 2 has been very improvisational. We are not only embracing the historical method of the spontaneous conversation, but we are also now eschewing traditional agendas, although we still have the same segments and the same structures. Now, I suspect, Mike, you've come with your own modest agenda, or at least ideas of things that you want to talk about. But as you know, sticky paper with all your bank passwords on it. But as you know, we start every episode of Metaviews with the news, partly to promote Metaviews Substack, which is a near daily publication covering the news, ideas, philosophies, all the things that one needs to navigate the world that we find ourselves in. But the real purpose of the news segment is to throw to our guest and say, Mike, what news do you bring us? And then I use that as an opportunity to talk about the news that I want to talk about as well. So, Mike, what do you got for us?
Subject you wrote about 2 issues ago in Metaviews was near and dear in my mind, which is law and order. It's something I've been fascinated with all of my life, but I probably hit my peak philosophy moment with it during the summer of 2020 when there were different television stations in my country calling law and order bad and good and talking about peace and riots. And I was just like bamboozled by what is law and order? How much respect do I and do I not have for it? And where do I go with this? So with that in mind, sorry, please.
And just to quickly interject, because, you know, if you bring up a very important shared moment in our history that we haven't discussed yet, it's important to me that we sort of throw language out there. I've recently heard someone refer to that period as a revolt. I've thought about it in similar contexts, that it was a kind of uprising, as disorganized and spontaneous as it was. But I think it's worth remembering because it kind of got overshadowed by the rest of the pandemic. And we're only now, I think, with sufficient distance, remembering what happened then. Sorry to interrupt. Actually, I'm not sorry. Please continue.
No, that was good. And I feel, as usual, a kinship with your view of that, because that is how I saw it. And it was interesting. I was a man in my early 40s when it happened. I wasn't a young buck. I have a family. I have property that I actually own. So it was an interesting moment. You know, the little punk rock anarchist with no kids in his teens who had thought about that day was certainly seeing it with a different vantage point. But
always
with
the
that
paradox.
Said,
always the paradox.
Yes, exactly. And so my article today, it's not clickbait, and it's something that just reminds me of just the phrase law and order, which was a Mexican mayoral candidate was gunned down and murdered in front of a live broadcast of a campaign rally in Mexico, either yesterday or this morning. It's hard for me to tell on the article. I guess it was Sunday night. So, but 2 things about this struck me. One, it was a Facebook live stream, which is something I've been hearing about but not talking about, which is that apparently murder is legal to be shown on Facebook and other internet sites now. And it's not that I have a moral issue with that. It's that America went out of its way to protect its citizens since the Vietnam War by not showing caskets, not showing death. As you know, I'm the host of a podcast called Coffin Talk. So all of this is right up my alley. So the article, I'm not bringing it up because Mexico's so dangerous, blah, blah, blah. It's nothing to do with that. It's just, here's an example of what is law and order and where does it deserve to be, because by all accounts, this woman was a nice woman running peacefully for mayor, and she was just trying to get her name out there. and the lack of law and order is why she is now deceased, and she will not be winning this election.
Well, and let me start with a brief correction. The one
Mhm.
caveat modifier you need to add when talking about things like Facebook is it depends on the jurisdiction.
Oh,
Because
okay. Yeah.
here in Canada, Facebook does not allow any news whatsoever on their platforms. So if you saw, let's say, an article on the CBC about Prime Minister Mark Carney selecting his cabinet, and you wanted to share it on your Facebook or on Instagram to sort of say, hey, look at the people he's nominated to his cabinet, right? I'm not saying anything controversial in using this as an example. Facebook would not allow it. They do not for a really long, convoluted, stupid chain of events. All news is banned on Meta platforms in Canada, and the loophole is Substack. So you can post Substacks, which is paradoxical because I think Substack is news. And one of our Metaviews members, who you sort of now know digitally, Ken Chase, he actually has figured he's created his own workaround so that he can post news on Facebook by using a URL obfuscator.
That's
So
cool.
it's a very porous ban, but it's a ban nonetheless. So one has to remember that the Facebook experience is no longer universal, that
And
it varies substantively jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
how would it work with the live stream phenomena, which is what this article is specifically talking about?
Again, also a different like a different configuration, for lack of a better word, right? There's a whole live streaming in Canada. It's still problematic, but it's different because of the rules and the regulations. So you don't have the same I don't want to say freedom because it's not the right word, but you don't have the same landscape upon which to get into trouble. You have a different landscape upon which to get into trouble. But you also brought up in using your example, I've been thinking a lot lately about North American culture and the similarities we have and the differences. And I think you raise an interesting point that there's a gradient of political violence, where in Mexico, political violence is far more normalized than it is in America, which is far more normalized than it is in Canada. And yet, conversely, the violence against Indigenous peoples in Canada is far greater than it has been against in the United States, compared to far greater than it necessarily has been in Mexico, which still has a very, very large Indigenous population that is, thoroughly integrated in terms of, or I shouldn't say integrated, thoroughly present within the larger kind of Mexican culture and Mexican. So again, random thoughts here within this new segment. Well done. We move on, of course, to the future, because where the news deals with the present, we must think of the future, anticipate the future, make up the future. So what do you got from us, Big Mike? Given that America currently has dominated Canada's perception of the future, although that has kind of gone down a little bit, but it's still there, humming. What future do you offer, Radical American Whackadoo?
Yeah, and it's pretty radical today, but it does have to do with the theme that you spoke about, which is chaos. I think the future is first of all, the future is always chaos by my definition of chaos. But what I think the future is a gradual seeping acceptance and less of a cognitive dissonance between reality as this like fixed thing that we can like control, and then just the actual state of reality, which is chaos. And I think that that's gonna come. And now, unfortunately, for people who are like worried about crime and law and order, this has nothing to do with that. This is just the cognitive dissonance is going to decrease, not increase.
Well, and that's an important phrase, because cognitive and cognitive dissonance are two phrases most people have no familiarity with. And as soon as you use those phrases, you both demonstrate a certain cognitive bias. And secondly, a certain desire for lack of a better phrase, enlightenment or awareness that many people struggle with or still eschew. Now, I will use that to take a tangent, but then come right back to the subject in a chaotic way. I regularly get frustrated with things. Like I'm autistic ADHD. I have a very short attention span. And I have to, if I stay with something, I have to keep evolving, right? You got to keep, those not busy being born are busy dying, right? It's one of the central mantras of the Metaviews methodology. And one of the things that frustrates me as a creator is the individualistic notion of creation. Right? That especially in North America, we always want to ascribe an author, a creator, somebody, a Kurt Cobain as distinguished from Nirvana. Like we feel this need to always elevate the individual. And what I haven't been doing it lately, but most of my writing in Metaviews is always under the language of we. And it's partly because even though I'm writing for others. I'm writing with others. I'm conversing. I'm getting ideas, right? So it's always a we because I don't want to claim ownership of it. I'm sharing ownership. I'm sharing the whatever. But what frustrates me with Metaviews, what's frustrated me with season 2 of Metaviews, which started very individualistic in that I was just putting anybody on, and has ended with me only wanting to put on people who I actually enjoy having a conversation with. I'm kind of thinking that season 3, I really want it to be more of a cast of characters than it is necessarily a traditional podcast. And I'm going to try to do this with the season 2 finale on ontology, which I'll mention later on in the podcast. But I like that we have different characters, and I like that they approach things from different ways. And I suspected you were going to bring chaos in today because I've been teasing you about the word on Substack. And of course, our last episode published. I recorded an episode last week that I haven't published yet, that I'm still sitting on the fence. But our last episode was with Goddess Laura, who is our goddess of chaos, complexity, and I always forget the last 3. Contradictions, I think it is. I hope it is. But it struck me that while we had our local goddess of chaos on and we discussed chaos, I thought, well, what does the Radical American Whackadoo bring to the conversation of chaos? And it is kind of the court jester, right? And the way the court jester plays a role of chaos, the way the goddess historically plays a different role of chaos. And this is where I kind of want to push you, not today, but moving forward, because you're clearly onto something. There's an insight that is drawing you in the word chaos. So rather than have you abandon the word chaos, I want you to focus on a poetics of chaos. And when I say a poetics of chaos, I think what you and I would agree on is that the word chaos has been maligned, misunderstood, and really neglected in our Western society. And yet there's tremendous power to the word and pervasiveness as a concept, like it surrounds us. And when you identified it with cognitive and cognitive dissonance, I was like, yes, absolutely. Your sense making is literally in the face of chaos. And part of your sense making is saying our sense making is at a certain level futile because it's always chaos, but you're still engaged in the sense making, often deep and profound sense making. So one of my homeworks for you today, especially thinking about season 3, is what is a poetics of chaos? And I say poetics because you're a word man. If you want to go more abstract, you can do an aesthetics of chaos, right? Because aesthetics is more than just the words. It's the vibe, the feeling, the look, the feel. But yeah, poetics of chaos or aesthetics of chaos. I think we could have a lot of fun. If you meditate on that while you're stoned a few times and then come back and we have a good chat about it, I think there's much we can get from that combination. Now, on the subject of future, even though I'm transitioning here to feature because it's kind of a borderline subject, I am talking about the season 2 finale on the subject of ontology, and there's a bit of a scheduling difficulty. Because I have some people in Europe who I want to participate, and I have potentially some people on the Pacific time zone who I want to participate. And so that's kind of coming down to like noon Eastern time. Now, I know days of the week can be difficult for you. does that mean a Tuesday at noon is something that could work with enough advance notice?
I can the Tuesday part might not work because actually I was going to bring this up in a funny way,
Okay,
but
good.
my daughter is taking a crucial swim lesson, and if she passes today, we're going to
Yeah.
move our entire schedule to Wednesday, so it would just be a
Okay.
day shift. But
Fair.
yes, noon, what I call Eastern time,
Yeah.
is 9 a.m. where I am, and yes, I
Yeah.
can do that
Okay.
nearly any day of the week. Actually, nearly any day of the week.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And,
So, yes.
and again, I'm gonna like this. I'll promote this like on the newsletter and do enough time that I can make sure we get enough participants as possible.
I love it.
The subject is ontology,
Which is
and,
one of my favorite things. So
well,
yes.
and what I've been saying as part of the preview. So, what is your gut response to that? I like like Rorschach tests, like Chevy Chase and Eddie Murphy or Richard Pryor. Chevy Chase and Richard Pryor, back and forth. When I say ontology, you say
Ridiculous.
elaborate.
The idea of knowledge as different from wisdom is horrifying to me, and the idea of quantifying it and then using words like facts and then the circularness of it all is it's always put a real it's a downer. It's hard for me to adjust and deal with. I don't like being in a room with fact-driven ontologists, but I love discussing the harvesting of knowledge, the accumulation of what we call knowledge, the dissecting of it. Like, for example, Thomas Jefferson was warning Lewis and Clark about dinosaurs as they marched west in the year 1810. And people think that Thomas Jefferson was like the greatest, smartest person alive. Yeah, he might have been, but he still believed in dinosaurs. Like, and so right now, metaphorically speaking, what ontological subjects are we like very errant on, and what are we pretending and worried about, especially with fear, because that's really what's behind the chaos stuff.
Right on. And I still want to stay within the realm of preview mode. I don't want to
No,
get
I'm sorry.
No, you did great. You did great.
Okay.
But again, just to reinforce, as I'm trying to empower you and embolden you moving forward, as the Radical American Whackadoo, you kind of have the officially anointed role of fucking with people. Right? On the fair exchange that I get to fuck with you.
Yes,
right.
100%.
So when we do this large group event, if there are any sacred cows, if you see ways in which you can respectfully, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to have the official role of fucking with people unless I knew that they were the kind of human who you are. Right. It is not the kind of power that I would want to bestow upon anyone. But I am saying that's your role. That's what I want you to do, because you have a good sense of how to take the conversation into those realms. In a way, I think that enlightens and
thank you.
and turns people on. And with that said, one of the other agendas that I had today that I'm going to roll to before I certainly encourage you to take this conversation spontaneously where you see fit is I want to have more advertising in season 3. And I want these to be really fucking absurd ads.
Dude, oh my God.
like SCTV, but even greater, right? Because you made this aside the other day that not a lot of people think 10 years into the future, right? And you were arguing that your wife is someone who doesn't really think 10 years into the future. And I had this dual moment where on the one hand I was like, I don't think I really ever think 10 years into the future, or when I do, it's really absurdist. But then I thought, really, that is this podcast. That the primary audience of this podcast is me 10 years in the future.
Wow.
I enjoy the shit I was making 10 years ago, and I just sort of was tapping into it, right? So that is why I want to get some really fucking absurd ads as part of the Metaviews aesthetic, the Metaviews vibe.
I love that idea, and I always am worried that like Metaviews has a huge and always growing audience, which makes me happy. But then when I'm commenting as some people know me as the Radical American Whackadoo. Some people don't know me at all, and other people might know me through the chat app that we were talking about. And so I'm always like wearing multiple hats and a little worried about how I'm going to come across. And then I'm also not worried, but I want to make sure I'm talking to you because you're the
Yeah.
person I'm commenting to. I'm not really talking. If other people want to comment back and start a discussion, that's fine. But
that's an interesting point, because
Yeah.
you're dealing with another paradox, which is, on the one hand, like any human being, you're trying to understand the context, right? You're trying to imagine the community that you find yourself in. And like a digital community, it can be inherently opaque. But the paradox here is that almost every single member of the community is an inherent contradiction in multiple ways. Right? Like everyone is constantly wrestling with who the fuck they are, where the fuck they are, why am I here, in every setting they're in.
Yeah.
And then they find themselves in a community of people who are all doing that all the time, constantly.
Yeah.
So that's where I sort of say, don't worry about it, but at the same time, worry about it, because you're going to worry about it. But at the same time, don't worry about it. And that's the paradox. And what I want to try to achieve in season 3 that I have not achieved in 20 years of doing this shtick is it's still everyone with a hand on an elephant, but they don't know it's an elephant. They don't know what their hand on. Like, I know what Metaviews is, but still nobody else does. Right? And that,
I agree.
That's kind of by design. Like, I've always desired that. But now I feel that I'm surrounded by people who are smart enough that they can start to understand it, right? And to use Ken as an example, he's been part of this now for 25 years. And in those 25 years, I think he has as much of an understanding as Sharita or David, who also have 25 years. But they still don't understand someone like you until you start to understand it as well. And then it starts to unravel and starts to unravel and starts to unravel. Like, for example, Kiwano, who has, posted 6 or 7 messages today in response to your message. And I haven't read them yet.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I read them, it's going to take like time to think about it, because it's deep philosophical shit.
Yeah.
Right? That is more like highfalutin than any university or graduate program anywhere in the fucking world. And how do we translate it into podcast form? How do we translate it into newsletter form? I cannot do as an individual. We can only do as a motley crew, creating a chorus of chaos that then can, and so on and so forth. So the salon methodology is kind of where we're coming back to, but the commercials are an important part of that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that you and I also share in common is an appreciation of pop culture. And when I say pop culture, I include sports. And that part of the power of those things is familiarity. Right?
Yes.
Like the 7th inning stretch. Like there's something to the 7th inning stretch that everybody knows and understands and can have a reference to. And that's where I feel commercials have been lacking. And these commercials have to be like just as SCTV holy fuck as the conversations we're having. I'm rambling.
You're not. You're going a lot of places, and I wanted to go to a lot of these places. I have notes. I'm never going to get to them, but I am going to say one thing that's not on the note that you just talked about, which is I actually am finding myself having a longing for monoculture only for the reason you just stated. It's the idea that, like, there's just a funny commercial with Charles Barkley advertising Right Guard deodorant, and we all get it. We don't all get Gillette deodorant. We don't all care about Charles Barkley, but everyone knows that this like big gregarious black man plays sports and he's somewhat famous, and it doesn't matter if you watch sports. And I miss that. I know it has to die. I know it is dying, and I don't care, but I don't like that people are desperately trying to replace it with like social media, one or a different one. Sometimes I even like want to get on TikTok just to get the jokes at the end of all of your issues, because they always have like a TikTok reel. I'm not on it for like stupid, silly. There's no important reason. It's not like I'm on a hill and I'm going to die on it.
Are you able to play them on the web anyway as a
yeah.
And
I can, and I see them, and what it does is it like tickles me, and then I'm like, oh, I'm kind of learning how people get lost in social media. Like I hear people I greatly admire say, I wasted another 4 hours on Instagram, and I don't lose respect for them, but I'm like dumbfounded. You could not get me to be on Instagram for 4 hours. Nothing could get me to do that. I don't know if it's my form of ADD, but
I could lose 4 hours to opium easy.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be a good idea.
So there's something about like reels and things. And so when you said the thing about SCTV ads and all that, I love that. I love the idea of it. And being in these groups, and I pluralize it because like the chat group isn't exactly the same as Metaviews and stuff. It's interesting because I even asked you this a long time ago. I said like, how funny am I allowed to be? And you're like, I'm not making rules for any of you guys, which is fun. You're like a guy who starts a big party and then like leaves, and it's just like all these guests in a room, and there's like,
to be honest, it's like a guy who invites a big party and then sits in the corner smoking joints the whole night, just watching everybody having chuckles, enjoying himself. But I try to participate. And for the record, you are correct to point out that the chat is distinct from the other manifestations of Metaviews. So anyone listening right now who knows how to contact me, and fuck, if you know how to use Google, that shouldn't be hard. You're welcome to join our Signal chat. It's a Signal chat. Messages last a week before they expire. Not everybody knows each other, but I know who everybody is, to your point that I've organized this party. And it is, I think, intended to be surreal, but at the same time sincere. And I think that's what people are trying to figure out is the balance between the two.
And there was a moment the first day I joined, and I didn't comment on it, but I've still been dying to get back to it, but it never came up again, which is a lot of these. And again, I respect, from what I can tell, I respect everyone in the group. And I'm only saying that because if they're watching this and they are like, wait, this guy's about to talk about me. I don't even know who said these things. I just know that there was a lot of talk about how to divest and reinvest and protect capital. And I always find that funny because you're like on a farm and like, you better divest and protect your capital, right? No, actually, you better get the hell outside and make sure that the goats don't die and that the weeds are, and like, so I keep thinking about this.
Because that's the capital.
Well, that's what's so, it's blowing my mind that I live in a hot desert valley that gets to the regularly in the 110s, and the water gets piped in, and there's 6 million and counting. It's growing and growing and growing here, and no one knows how to make food, let alone has arable land, has water. I mean, it's just chaos. And we're like one bad, what was it, in Madrid or wherever it was, Spain, power outage away from not only people freaking out, but like people also, again, the decreasing cognitive dissonance, the decreasing awareness of what could happen and what is happening. And so I'm just always thinking about how funny it is that I too fall for this, like, oh no, Trump's president, tariffs, how do I protect my money? But like, really, I should just be spending it all of it. I really actually have completely come to this, like, money is things are not going to look the way they do in 10 years. I'm just sure of it. That's, you want me to talk about the future. That's it.
Well, and there is a paradox that the word currency is at its heart current, right? As in now, as in use it now. It's not meant to be kept around, right? It's meant to, create more amperage now, to increase your currency now. If you're investing it in yourself, in your family, in a way that you can get more later. I'd rather have our money conversation on a different day, because I think that would merit a whole deep dive unto itself. But you said a few things there that I wanted to pick out, and one is you keep connecting chaos and cognitive dissonance, and I keep thinking discombobulation. And I think that on the one hand, while that has become the mainstream narrative, while that has become the monoculture, there is a lot of meaning when you let go of that. And so I share your paradox of not wanting monoculture, but still having fond memories of like, what's that? What's that? like old moments of pop culture that united us and made us feel that we were like all. And I think we can still have that outside of the toxic system that currently controls it, right?
Yeah.
That there'll always be a kind of inspiration. There'll always be an aggregation of sentiment that people just want to share and want to celebrate. And so there is that desire. But, for example, to take a total tangent, but not a tangent, I saw a Gen Xer talking about how young people don't know the word sellout. And how, Gen Z doesn't even understand the word sellout, or why it might be a bad thing, why it would be an insult to say, hey man, you're a sellout. But for us, it was like, it really was a part of the culture and a part of your identity and a part of who you are. And it speaks to how the culture has shifted so much that we've lost that moral compass. We've lost that
Mhm.
kind of moral anchor. And I think it is still there. I think that these things are still there. It's just a matter of remixing, reconfiguring, just hacking the culture so that these sentiments come back, because they are there. People want to make those connections. The same way, to your point, people want to eat food. They want to have water. If it comes to them through pipes, if it's available at the store or even better in delivery, they don't think about it. But when that
Mhm.
shit goes away, then they think about it, and those are opportunities, right?
And
To think
yeah,
things differently.
I really feel like it would be so simple for us to regain our mutual self-respect, all of us. And I've been thinking a lot about this word. This is one of my notes, the middle. People are like, "Oh, the middle has shifted." The middle, like people just refer to this thing called the middle, and there's this implied idea that the middle is sane and rational and the extremes are not. And I'm really starting to see how that actually is a huge problem. This idea that as long as you're not raving about woke people or raving about cutting down the budget, you're normal. You're a nice guy or girl. You're a good human. And it's a fallacy. It's a huge logical fallacy, and it's not true. And when I read some of your really biting, like pushy, my word, ideas, they get me in that spot in a good way, and they really like force me to think like, well, I just see Jesse's idea as extreme because it's been told to me that that's extreme my whole life. But is it really extreme to try to restart society without destroying it? Like, so in other words, to this is a weird example, but you'll know exactly where I'm going with this. Why did we stop getting dressed up for airplanes? What's up with that? And was that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I see it as a weird slippery slope that led to people urinating on the floor, yelling at flight attendants, acting like assholes, not putting headphones on. Like, to me, what once was this stuffy, stupid, rich person's dumb rule that I fucking hated has now, I now see why it was there. I see why that poll existed. I see why we said children are meant to be seen and not heard, but I
But
also want them to be seen and heard.
but let me validate your sentiment there by pointing out it's always important to reframe the original concept, because the original, I would reframe the original not as rich people rules, but
No, yeah,
as
yeah.
flying is a performance, and you should dress the part.
Mm-hmm,
Because what is true about flying is we all have to perform. The
mm-hmm,
captain leads the performance, right? Because this is true on a ship, right? Historically, when you went on a ship, everyone had to perform a task, everyone had to perform a duty. And so the reason I think of the importance of dressing in a certain way when one travels is because one is expected to perform, right? Like the traveling, especially air travel, is not your usual situation. Life is at risk, right? There's systems that need to be adhered to. You're expected to line up. You're expected to sit in a certain seat. You're expected not to be a dickhead.
mm-hmm.
And that kind of involves a performance that I think merits a costume. And when you decide that you're not going to dress up, you're not going to perform, you're going to act the same way you would in your living room, you are breaking the social contract that travel requires.
Yeah.
And that's a conservative position, and I'm okay
Mm-hmm,
with that in the
mm-hmm,
context of, a non-ideological conservatism. But
mm-hmm,
you said something else there that I think is also worth teasing out, which is the middle doesn't exist. And I've
mm-hmm.
been doing a lot of thinking lately about the herd, and I wrote an issue on the herd, and I'm going to do a follow up issue because I'm now in the we're now part of the season where I start every day with my goats. I take them on a walk every morning, and there is no middle to a herd.
Mm.
And what strikes me is that the concept of the herd permeates our political language, but we've disconnected it with the actual meaning of the herd. Because I said this as an aside in that issue that the herd is not the subjugation of individuals. Like, what's fascinating when I'm with the goats is every single one of them is a defiant fucking individual. Like, the way you would think of a
Yeah,
goat,
yeah.
right? And they're all fucking with each other and running their own agenda. Like, none of them are in the middle. There is no middle. They are all on the fucking extreme, constantly doing their shit. And it is your perception when you look at them that you think it's a middle, but the middle never manifests. Because they're fucking all over the place, running all around, whatever. And everyone gets a chance to lead. And not today, but yesterday. I was telling Jeanette this. Moisha is currently our youngest goat, right? He's like maybe fucking 3 weeks old. He led the whole herd yesterday.
Wow.
Because he was like, fuck this, I want to go home. Right? And for whatever reason, he was determined enough and everyone followed. He led everyone home. Right? Like the youngest, most stupidest, most inexperienced goat can be the leader just because his desire for one moment was strong enough. It was like, all right, fuck it, let's go. And so that's where I think the danger in fascist America is believing that there's a middle. Because right now, the middle is authoritarian. The middle is corporate. The middle is tyrannical. And the extremes are sensible. The extremes are reasonable. The extremes are where freedom currently lives. But they're not the extreme, right? And it's the construction of it. It's thinking of America as a herd where everyone needs to be in the herd without realizing that the American herd is comprised of individuals, crazy fucking individuals, who the more that they're allowed to do what they're going to do, the more the herd will be healthy and safe and blah, 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 blah. That would be a very extremist position in America, but it, is really quite conservative in an agrarian sense. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. What else you got in your notes there?
No, that was great. And I think we covered the middle perfectly. I'd like to move on to when you talked about beliefs, because I wanted to do a typical Mike Jesse word game, which is let's discuss the difference between belief and beliefs and hope. Would you like to start, or would you like me to?
You can start. I mean, I think it might be a category issue, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. It could be. What I do know is when I hear people talk, which is often because I'm a good listener, I hear people sort of casually interchange belief and hopes. They go, well, my beliefs and my hopes. And your article made me really think about how different the two are, because I'm always hopeful. It is a personality of mine. It is not something I choose. I wake up and most mornings I'm very hopeful. And the mornings where I'm not are terrible and they're mysterious and weird, and I accept them because that's part of self-awareness, but I do not want to be that person. I don't care if other people like it. It's just not my job to be unhopeful. But beliefs are really weird, and I don't like beliefs. I've never been a fan of beliefs. I don't like believing my son is going to return to me. That just sounds weird and also like stupid to hinge my entire future hopes on that. But to hope he returns to me, it would be insane not to. It is the thing I want the most in the world. I want to be reunited with my son. I don't need to get into the backstory. People can just figure it out. But the point is, that's how I see the difference between beliefs and hopes, is like, I don't have a belief he's going to return. I have a strong hope, and I read stories and I have confirmation bias in favor of it. But belief is it's dangerous, in my opinion, and yet you did a good job of explaining how it's also not dangerous.
Well, and I think there's a few other words to throw into the mix. The other is agency, right? Because in your case, agency and hope are connected, right? The same way that your dislike of beliefs is out of a perception that it hinders your agency.
Yeah,
because you'd rather have the ability to exercise agency. But I think the other word that's relevant is emotions. And I think it's worth pointing out, especially as men and men who were born before 2000, that most people don't understand emotions, and most people, in fact, avoid understanding emotions or try to compartmentalize their emotions without recognizing that emotions, belief, agency, and since you're putting the word in there, we'll use it as the case example, hope, are all interconnected, right? And I would hypothesize, I don't know, because we're being spontaneous here, I would hypothesize that hope is a belief of yours. And it is a belief of yours that you have measured or moderated because of your deep skepticism of beliefs. Which is to say, if you use a completely different analogy, so I'm going to bring in some more words, like ideology is kind of pervasive because everybody has ideas. And in theory, you could find people who have no fucking ideas, right? Who are not interested in ideas, who have no time for ideas. But even then, there's probably still a few ideas that they wrap their world around, like pizza is good, right? Or driving is fast, right? And those are their ideas. But that doesn't mean they're an ideologue. Versus you could have someone who is so into ideas that they become an ideologue, right? And they could be a fascist or a liberal or a communist, right? Or whatever. And so I think you live in a world where belief has been weaponized, and you have found the one belief that has been least weaponized and that you can use without being dogmatic. And it is, again, where other people might use Christ or other people might use prophet, right? Or whatever, you've used hope. And hope is that belief. And what has made it different for you than other people is it's connected you to an emotional awareness that few people have. Because few people do have the emotional awareness to say the sentence you did, which is some days I wake up and my default is hope. But there are some days I wake up and it's not good. I fucking hate those days. And I'm trying to make sure that that guy, it doesn't, he's not around as often as he should be. Most people can't say that. That sentence there, the construction of self, the awareness of emotions, the exercise of agency, that reflects a lifetime of pursuing awareness, of pursuing the subjects you have, right? So that is what allows you to create this unique cocktail that you call hope, that I would say other people who use that word probably don't use it in the way you do.
I think I agree with most of what you said, except, I have to get into one point you made before I can make my point, which is about ideas. Ideas themselves might be ideas, but most people have an emotional attachment and or reaction to their ideas, which again complicates, not simplifies what we're talking about. But I just want to say, hats off to you for pointing that out, because I think
because beliefs are the same.
Yeah, and I think that when I talk about hope, I'm talking about a belief, like you said. But when I feel hope, it is not what we're talking about. And so now I'm aware, yet again, of this. Yeah.
Except I would say it is, as the Taoist, I would say that it is what you're talking about, but you have found a different door. You have found a different gateway, or to be true to the Taoist language, you have found a different path. So these are two paths to the same thing. Yeah. One is based on emotion, one is based on belief, and to you they're completely different. Yeah. But you use the same language, which suggests that it is the same fundamental place.
I wouldn't know yet.
Otherwise, you'd use different words, right?
Yeah. Well, I think after I reflect on this, I will have better answers to what you just asked, but I need that time, and I want that time. That's why I like talking to you. So.
Well, and I think that's the purpose of these exercises for us in the audience, is we live in a world that always tries to collapse language into itself, that tries to take words that should be distinct and make them the same. When I think as humans, our brains become stronger when we keep these words distinct. Because ideology, belief, idea, like all these, for some people, could be collapsed. Yeah. But because we unpack them, it allows us to say, yeah, I know people who are so emotionally tied to their ideas. And they really can't talk about these ideas without then feeling that their agency is, like, you know what I mean? And this is what our friend Russell gets into. Yes, because he really sees how people react to him. Yeah, right? Because he hits those fault lines, right? And he triggers people in those ways, in his own desire to get understanding. But again, this is why I think it's important that we keep these words as distinct as possible, because they help us understand those fault lines and when and where they trigger people.
It's funny because so you brought up what's up, and if you don't know what that is, Google it, try to figure it out. But I'll give you a hint: it's a beer commercial. The reason I want to connect that really quickly to something is I almost feel like right now the term and the word and the use of woke is what's up. It's like this ambiguous, nebulous, weird word that, like, depending on who I'm talking to, I will or won't use it, and I will or won't use it differently even. So, like, if I need a shortcut and someone's losing attention span, but I have them, I need to use the word woke the way they want to hear it to make my point. And so it's like interesting because we lost the word woke, and now we've replaced it with the word woke.
But okay, let me encourage you to up your game though, because everything
Sure,
you said
yeah.
right there was true.
Mhm.
But what if, and this is part of our mutual upping each other's game. I'm not trying
Yeah,
to
yeah,
suggest
for
this
sure.
is one way, not at all. But what if, because I share the desire to make the point, and maybe that's the wrong metaphor, because I don't always want to make a point, although that is often fucking true. Really, I want to make a connection.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
I want to
Totally,
reach
totally.
into that person, make a connection, and then go, yes, human being, good. Yes, friend, good. Regardless
Yeah,
of their politics, regardless of
yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
I think that it's still lazy to do what you described. It is
Mhm.
effective to do what you described, but it's lazy in the sense that I think that we have the ability to go beyond that
Mhm.
and use the words that might trigger people and use them the way we want to use them, not the way that they want us to use them. And that's harder. And it's fraught with peril, and it's easy to fuck up. And I'll give an example here to reinforce your point. And it's a bit of a long one, so I'll try to be fast. Because ironically, I think you're absolutely right about WhatsApp and woke. And I think it's because, to your point, made either deliberately or inferredly, WhatsApp is inherently political. Because every time I say the word WhatsApp, I think of little, and he's not so little anymore, I think of little Elian Gonzalez. Little
Wow. Yeah.
Elian Gonzalez, this Cuban
Wow.
kid, right? Who
Yeah.
got caught in this big parental dispute and this big, Cuba versus America and communism in America. Again, we'll have people Google it. You remember. So I think that these pop culture things are inherently political. And woke
Uh-huh.
was a word I stayed the fuck away from forever. It was just, I
Uh-huh.
don't want to go there. Just too contentious, too fraught with peril, too too many ways it can go wrong. And I've since been coming back to it. And I only use it in hostile environments. I only use it in environments where I know I'm surrounded by anti-woke people.
Uh-huh.
And I use it in a way in which it's what's the word I'm looking for here? Ambiguous.
Uh-huh.
They don't know which side I'm on.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah, yeah,
using
yeah.
it to fuck
Yeah.
with them to see
Yeah.
what side they're on. And as soon as
Simpatico.
I find out, I quickly go into, when I was a kid, we just used the word racist. Right? And just fucking step on the gas and just go,
Yeah.
we don't say woke or woke. We go racist or not racist. Which one are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Right? And it flips them pretty hard. I'm
love it.
digressing, but
No, that was great. And that is, first of all, as you already introduced me to the audience, I love to fuck with people, but I also love what you talked about as much, if not more, which is human connection. So I'm a somewhat paradoxical to some people, but everyone who's ever met me in person, like, can be around me in person. I'll just put it that way. Like, I've never been in a situation where I felt like I wasn't okay to be in a room or at a party or somewhere. Even if people don't like me, I'm not disliked. And yet I do what we just talked about.
yeah.
And I think what you said, though, because I did want to thank you. It doesn't have to be on air, but you told me a long time ago to start a community locally, and I did it. And it starts this Sunday, and I already have like a pretty great attendance for it, and I'm very excited. And it's called
But
Let's Learn.
no. Wait.
Yeah.
It starts Sunday,
Yeah.
so you don't know what the attendance is yet.
No. I said the project. I didn't say this, but what I meant.
But
to
you
say
don't
is,
know. Wait until Sunday
yeah.
until you say.
Yeah. All I know is this. If I was staring at an empty RSVP list, my attitude would not be jovial right now. The idea that some people have agreed to come is enough for me to feel what we're talking about, which is...
Hope is not something I have. And that's
No,
where
definitely not.
I'd say I'd rather have 0 RSVP than 100 RSVP and 100 no-shows.
I would rather have 100 RCPs and 100 no-shows. And
Okay,
I could explain
fair
it,
enough.
That's hilarious, yeah. No, and I get it. I do. Actually, this goes into what I was talking about with chaos, which is I read a book recently that changed my view of time, which is time is not actually the same. Like, if Einstein once said this, but like 10 minutes in front of a beautiful woman is not the same thing as 10 minutes in a burning fire or your hand on a stove. I also now see that moments are what we collect, and we have moments that last longer or shorter than others, but the significance in our memory is not related to the amount of time. So your goal is to collect good energy, good moments, right?
Yes.
So if I have a week-long moment of thinking 100 people are coming, followed by a 5-minute awareness that no one showed up, then I get to choose my reaction to it for however long that moment will be.
Okay,
So we're
cool.
talking about 3 moments.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent way. It kind of reminds me of from The Wire. You know, you got 2 days of jail, the first day and the last day, right? And everything else is just a blur. So no, very well said. And it, goes into this larger point of this feels like a tangent, but it's not.
No, go for it.
I have a real problem with the anti-elite climate right now. And I was reminded by it when we were talking about airlines, because air travel is inherently an elite practice, right? You are fucking defying gravity. That is an entirely elite exercise. I've never had any problems with elites. I am a Democrat. I want to see everyone have power. But it's the same way that I don't see there being a middle. Because there's no middle, there's like elites are not inherently bad. Because what we're describing today, the way you just described yourself as an archetype in the context of a party, is elite. There are very few people who are in the George Carlin School of Humanity. And it is a very elite school of humanity. Because on the one hand, you really want to fuck with people. But on the other hand, you really desire that human connection. And there are very few comedians, and comedians are already an elite profession, who are in the George Carlin School of Humanity. But that is fundamentally one of the Metaviews kind of strains that we're talking about. Right. And that is something I think that we're trying to pursue moving forward in terms of these sessions, which is trying to take what we've amassed through our 4 or 5 decades of practice and elevate that to something that is not just what we do, but is something others can do. Because what George Carlin did was just be George Carlin. But what we in our aging years have the responsibility to do is to not only pursue our own desires, share these desires so that others can also walk this path. I'm kind of losing my train of thought here.
Well,
bail me out.
I'm very ready to bail you in. I'm rowing in the same boat as you. I think that there's a fear of elitism because of the way the word is used and also our associations with it. But at the same time, I think when there's a crisis, most people are like, where are the elite people to help me? So there's like this double-edged sword of like that word and that term. But with like the airplanes and with all that, like, this is what we're about to see is like when President Trump got elected both times, it doesn't matter which time, 2016 or most recently in 2024, people were like, oh no, he's not able to lead. Like, he doesn't have the qualifications. He's not, this is bad. This would be like letting a little boy be in charge of the actual plane that we're on. And yet that plane flew for 4 years with a little boy on it, and then for 4 years it flew with a different person on it, and now my country re-elected that same boy to come back and pilot the plane. And there is this fear of like, where the hell is he going? He's not using the instruments we regularly use. He's are we going to China? Are we going to Russia? You know, again, I don't want to overextend this metaphor, but I do feel like what happened in my lifetime is a lack of respect for people who know what the fuck they're talking about. And that never flies in airplanes. It doesn't fly with roller coasters. It doesn't fly with fucking elevator checks. So why the fuck are we? Yeah.
But let me stop your sentence short, because I think you're correct. But I think the danger of the argument you're making is it focuses on too narrow a part of the problem, which is experts and expertise, because they're the ones who have the power to make this. When I think the larger problem that we should also use as a recurring discussion, a recurring focus of our time, the lack of respect, period.
Yeah.
Right? Which, like, I think it is at a much deeper level. It's we need a society. A society requires respect to be a society. A society requires respect in order to function. In order to embrace complexity as an alternative to chaos, you need a foundation of respect. And we don't currently have that. We're actively attacking that. How do we build a culture of respect that is bottom up rather than top down. Rather than having a church or a state or a military occupying force impose respect, how do we foster a culture of respect that is bottom up, that is fair, that people believe in? Because that also, for me, aligns with the George Carlin School of Humanity, because he did seem like a guy who respect was a big part of how he thought about things, even though he was constantly disrespecting those in power.
Yeah, and I think I said I read a book earlier. This is not the same book, even though they're going to sound similar. I was indexing a book on positive psychology experiments, and one of the most fascinating ones was on long-term married couples, and it didn't matter if they were successful or not. That had nothing to do with it. It was just, have you been married a long time and not gotten a divorce? And one of the most common self-reported survey answers from both partners, regardless of gender and all the other stuff, was I perceive mutual respect from my partner. Yeah. And that's, I think, what we're talking about is the perception of respect is so much more important than what you think respect is. So paying attention to how someone is perceiving you is so much more important to their positiveness and their feelings.
But let me push back while agreeing with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think you're discounting perception when your point is spot on. I think the perception of respect is rarely inaccurate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think that the perception of respect is a very strong correlate to respect.
Yes,
and
that is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that one of the symptoms of our disrespectful society is people can say, no disrespect, but you're a fucking asshole.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Right.
I'm not racist, but
I think that's why part of what we do here is wordsmith and play with words. So let's come back to the issue of respect. I am, just because of the amount of shit and particulates that I've been inhaling, I'm really starting to feel it, and I've run out of water. So we are now at our shout outs part of every episode. Mike, who do you want to shout out?
Yeah, my shout out is to Dave Barry. He used to write for the Miami Herald. He might still. His new book, it will be best-selling autobiography, is out today. I bought it. He's actually coming to Phoenix tomorrow night, and I'm going to try to see him at a book event. He's hilarious. He's wise. He's literally woke, and he is an older man, and so I think it's really cool. Like, people are just constantly shit-talking older people right now, at least in my peer groups, and I hate that. I despise that, because what you said is true. The older I get, the more compassionate, kind, and caring I get. So, like, screw you if you think old people are crotchety and bitter. I'm not, you're not. And Dave Barry certainly is not. So he's my shout out. Check out Dave Barry. He's got a free Substack. He's hilarious. He writes short things, but he cares deeply about humans. He is a George Carlin of sorts. Right on. And I would add to an earlier point you made about changing perceptions of time, that the older you get, the faster time moves. I am very much feeling this these days, even though we got lots of daylight, which is great in terms of what you can accomplish in a day. But we have run out of time. Thanks again, Mike. Another fantastic episode. I don't know when season 2 is going to end, but I think I am going to start to schedule the finale. So at least that gets us closer and closer to a date. Our Radical American Whackadoo, of course, will be back, as will Metaviews. I sort of alluded, I recorded an episode last week that I still haven't released. So I will be releasing that soon. And Jeremiah Patterson is also due to be on the show. We've been rescheduling back and forth, so I want to get him on to talk about some news and the efforts and investigations that he's been up to. But other than that, lots of work here on the farm, and that explains our sporadic publishing. Check us out. Substack, Blue Sky, audio podcasts, algorithms, ratings, 5-star, 1-star. Go fuck yourself. We love you. Whatever you feel. It's good. Stay fresh. Stay cool. Out of words, but still talking. Uh-oh. Bye now.